This episode is in partnership with Fantasy WSL, the biggest fantasy game in women's football. Fantasy WSL is where you can manage your own squad and earn points for real-life performances. Rise through the ranks in leagues against your friends and fellow managers. Keep up to date with the WSL results and fixtures with game week and live match notifications. Head to fantasywsl.net or download the app from your app store and get started today. Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. On today's episode we're going to be looking back at the weekend's games, obviously a big game between City and Arsenal, and there are a few things to talk about with the transfer window closing as well. As ever, I'm going to be giving you all the numbers that you need. I'm your host, Stattorino. Yes, hello listener, welcome to Decoding the WSL. It is Wednesday the 5th of February, or maybe Thursday or Friday by the time that you are listening to this. It is, as ever, a delight to have you here with me today. Hope you're going to be enjoying all the stats, all the analysis that we're going to get into today. Looking back at game week 13 and the games that went on this weekend. We normally have a look back and a look ahead, but as there's no WSL games on this weekend, we're going to leave that to next week's pod. Where I'll be joined by a couple of guests to talk through everything for game week 14. But for this week, we're just going to be having a look at the 6 games that happened this weekend and obviously talking a little bit about the end of the transfer window. So this weekend, all the joy at the Joy Stadium was for the away team as City conceded 4 goals for the second time in 3 WSL games. At least Gareth Taylor's side weren't the worst Man City team on Sunday, Stacey Fullocks was kind enough to give Maisie Simons a card on her birthday, although unfortunately for Maisie it was a red card after a dangerous challenge in Brighton's 1-1 draw with Palace. It was all Kelly Gago for Everton against Leicester, the French forward scoring twice as Everton women's team matched the men in scoring 4 goals against Leicester this weekend. Liverpool welcomed back Marie Herbinger to the starting 11 and got back to winning ways with a 1-0 win at home to West Ham. For the second time this season, I can say this sentence, Villa's first game under their new manager was a resilient performance against a strong Chelsea team that ended up in a disappointing 1-0 loss. Spurs gave a debut start to Joie-ful, but it is Man Utd that are on the brink of a Champions League spot after their 1-0 win at home to Spurs. And this weekend there's only one place to start, isn't it? It's going to be City 3, Arsenal 4. Yes, a big game at the Joy Stadium between 2 of the top 4 and 2 teams that are definitely going to be vying for a Champions League spot come the end of the season. It was Manchester City 3, Arsenal 4. Arsenal opening up the scoring after just 42 seconds. Mariona Caldente dispossessing Leia Alexandri at the back and slotting it past a Chiara Keating that couldn't really do too much about that one. Then later on in the first half, Lotte Wimmoy won a free kick, and then from Kyra's cross, she managed to head in for a second goal, although she did get a bit wiped out by Chiara Keating in the process. Mary Fowler headed in over for Gino's cross to make it 2-1 at half-time, and then Miedema made it 2 goals in 2 appearances against Arsenal in a City shirt, scoring to make it 2-2. Frida Marnham then put Arsenal back ahead about a minute later, and she did something alongside Lotte Wimmoy that I really enjoyed. I think a lot of people have picked up on this, and too right too. Both of them, after they scored, made a sort of little symbol across the Arsenal badge when they scored, which is Gunners in British Sign Language. I saw them do it. I clocked they both did it, but I didn't realise that was why. So yeah, really good from them too. Both from Frida and Lotte Wimmoy. I'm assuming maybe some of the other players would have been in on it if they scored as well. After that, the next sort of major point in the game was Man City's 3rd goal, where Mary Fowler got her 2nd of the game, scoring a penalty after a Steph Catley foul. Now, this is one that has struck a lot of chat online, on other podcasts as well, because there are some questions being raised about refereeing, about VAR, especially in the women's game. I think kind of rightly so that the questions are being raised, but I'm not sure it's necessarily the right questions. There are people that are saying that this is a refereeing problem because the referees aren't good enough. There are people that are saying, well, this is why we need VAR, because VAR would pick it up. I know VAR is a thing that is quite expensive, and obviously the women's game isn't necessarily bringing in as much money as the men's does, for example. So I don't know if VAR is a viable like a viable option at the moment in every game. Personally, I think this is a excellent example of why the referral system works. It is a system that you get in cricket, you get in field hockey, you get in tennis, or you used to get in tennis anyway, and it works really well. And I think it's perfect to come into football. I know Gary Lineker speaks about it quite often, bringing it in. I think it was Sophie um, on the Girls on the Ball podcast mentioned this as well. And yeah, I'm a big advocate for it. I think it's great. Basically, each team would get, say, one referral a game. If you think a referee has given an incorrect decision, you would use your referral. And then you would go and look back at sort of replays or however many replays you've got. If there is a refereeing error and it gets overturned, great. You keep your referral. The decision gets overturned. If it turns out the referee was right, you lose your referral. So you don't just go and use your referral willy-nilly. If from the video you can't decide whether it should be overturned or not, then you keep your referral, but the referee's decision stands. And I just think that's a system that would work really well. It's not particularly expensive because you don't quite need as many cameras and things like that as VAR does. You would just need a little bit more investment, but I think it would work perfectly. Anyway, that made it 3-3 from the subsequent penalty that Mary Fowler scored, but obviously the game was not done there. There was an inevitable goal from Stina Blackstenius because this is obviously a game against Man City, so Stina Blackstenius is going to score. She was obviously started in this game as well by Rennie Slegers, and yeah, her late goal with what was Beth Mead's first assist of the season, amazingly, someone that is the all-time assist leader in the WSL. Her first assist of the season, a really good ball across. Nothing the Man City defenders could do about it, or if they were going to do anything about it, it would have been a little bit like the Chelsea goal that we'll come to later. But relatively easy tap in, Stina Blackstenius, and that was it, 4-3 to Arsenal. In this game, something I wanted to highlight was Mariona Caldente. I think she was probably the player of the match. She got a goal and an assist, assisting Frida Marnham's goal and obviously scoring really early on. But she was really good defensively in the game as well. I did put a post out on X and a few other places as well about her recoveries within the game. So she made 17 recoveries in this match alone. No other player has made more than 13 in a single game this season in the WSL. So that shows that is how much better she was in this game compared to not just other players, but compared to how well she's been playing in other games as well, because 17 is a huge amount of recoveries in a match. I think there was one performance last season, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, where a player got more in a game in a single match last season. But yeah, 17 is the max. This season hasn't been a single player in a game that got over 13. So just wanted to highlight that because that was a really strong point from Caldente. The other thing that we obviously have to talk about is a couple of transfers, because there is a loan signing either way between these two teams. Obviously, neither played in this game because you are not allowed to. I think you can if the sort of lending team, the parent team, allows it, but they never do. And that is, so Laura Wienreuter has gone from Arsenal to Man City on loan till the end of the season. She is a player that, personally, as an Arsenal fan, I really like. I'd be disappointed if she left the club, but by the way she was talking in her in sort of her post about it, it was almost like a heartfelt leaving the club, like she was transferring permanently. Personally, I'd be surprised if she is going to do that, because I think Man City need the cover, especially with Risa Shimizu out until probably next season, when she'll come back in from her ACL injury. So Wienreuter fits that gap for the end of the season, sort of as that right back cover. I don't think they need her permanently, but Wienreuter seems like she's leaving the club. With the way that she's spoken about it, we'll have to wait and see on that. Hopefully she doesn't. I think although she's not, I don't think as good as Emily Fox, I think she's a really good backup and probably the ideal level where she can keep Emily Fox honest as well. She's great for Arsenal and is a great rotation option as well. You know, in the cups and against the lesser teams in the league, she can still easily play at the level necessary. The other transfer to talk about is obviously the big one. What is surprisingly the big one, actually, especially in the English media anyway. Obviously, there is the small matter of Kira Walsh to Chelsea, but the one that seemed to grab all the headlines was Chloe Kelly, who has gone back to Arsenal, where she played many moons ago. She is back there to the end of the season. Obviously, her contract runs out at the end of the season as well, so we don't know if that's going to end up being permanent. I would imagine it's a case of let's see how it goes. Chloe Kelly, by the sound of it, still living up near Manchester. Had the offer to go to Brighton as well, from what I've read and heard online, but decided that Arsenal was a better option because of the travel. She'd be commuting. Manchester United, although is probably the outcome she would have liked, because I think she would fit in their system a lot better and be more likely to start, it seems like Man City just would not let that be an option, which I guess they are well within their right to do. I personally think we're going to see this Chloe Kelly sort of 6-month spell at Arsenal and then see her sign for Manchester United permanently. That's my prediction. We'll wait and see what comes. I think it's going to be a bit dependent on how she gets on at Arsenal. I think she's probably going to really enjoy her time at the club, but whether she gets enough pitch time is another matter. Obviously, Beth Mead and Caitlin Ford have been largely Arsenal's wingers all season, and that is a really good pair to have on the wings. Chloe Kelly, I think, is just as good, but brings a different dynamic. Caitlin Ford and Beth Mead are both more players that are going to be wanting to get on the ball, take players on, get into the box, and then set someone else up, or even get shots away themselves. Think about the Caitlin Ford goal. I think it was against Chelsea at the Emirates, where she picks it up and sort of dribbles around a few and then scores in at the near post. Chloe Kelly is not that sort of player. She is much more of a crosser, and she is really good at it. She has had the most crosses, or the most crosses by a single player in a single season. Chloe Kelly is first and second on that list, with last season and the season before, both at Man City, obviously. The only reason she's probably not there this season is because she's not getting played, for reasons we are still yet to know. I think she won't get enough game time, unfortunately, at Arsenal, because she just doesn't fit the system as well as Beth Mead and Caitlin Ford do. She'll probably start ahead of Ford to start with on that left wing, purely because Ford isn't 100%. But I think she's going to probably be getting enough game time to allow herself to get a spot in the England squad in the summer. But in terms of staying at Arsenal permanently, I don't think it's going to happen. Beth Mead will stay on the right wing. Caitlin Ford will come back to the left wing when she's fit. And obviously, Arsenal have got a good amount of youth coming through as well that can fit in next season. Or Alessia Russo could play out wide, or Lena Hurtig if she comes back from her seemingly never-ending injuries. I don't think it's going to be something that lasts, but I think it'll be something that'll be good for Kelly. I think it'll be something that'll be good for Arsenal for the rest of this season. Right, so that is the Arsenal game. I don't want to go on about it too much, because as an Arsenal fan, I don't want to get accused of just going on about how great Arsenal are. So we'll move on to a different team that are, unfortunately, even better at the moment. I'm going to talk about Aston Villa 0, Chelsea 1. This game was decided by a late goal, the only goal that was the difference between the two sides, a late Sarah Mayling own goal. I feel a bit sorry for her here. She had to do something. There was a great ball in from Myra Ramirez. There we go. And Sarah Mayling, if she had left the ball there, Mike Mano had an easy tap in. She had to try and get something on it. Obviously, was not trying to score an own goal. Was probably trying to put it over or put it wide. But yeah, I think Chelsea had put Aston Villa in that position where she couldn't help but score an own goal. All she could basically do was take away Hermana's goal bonus. It probably wasn't the best game. I didn't actually watch this all the way through. I only caught the highlights. From what I've heard people saying, it wasn't the best quality game of football. It wasn't, well, not best quality, but the most entertaining game of football. There was a really good moment for Aston Villa in this game where I thought, I would have thought if I didn't already know what the score was anyway, they were going to score. Lovely bit of interchanging play between like Rachel Daly and Kirsty Hansen. Hansen eventually getting a strike from outside the box. Hannah Hampton touching it onto the bar. It was nearly probably one of the goals, probably the goal of the month, if not one of the goals of the season. But unfortunately for Aston Villa, that Hannah Hampton touch took it away. The former player, preventing Aston Villa from getting a goal in this game, and obviously Chelsea do what Chelsea do and eventually get there and get their late winner. Something that isn't as big a story as I thought it was going to be, especially in the UK anyway, has been Kira Walsh moving to Chelsea. A lot of people have spoken about this, but not in loads of depth. So I'm not going to, well, to be honest, I'm kind of going to be the same because there isn't that much to say about it. Kira Walsh is a player that we knew was wanting to leave Barcelona. Arsenal made an approach in the summer. If you believe what you read online, it was going to be a world record fee. Obviously, never came to pass for whatever reason, don't really know. But this summer it has. I think Kira Walsh is a player that would have been ideal for Arsenal to get, but also is still a player that's just going to improve Chelsea as and when she comes into that starting lineup. They've already got Erin Cuthbert, they've already got Sjoeke Nusken that sort of play in those positions, but Kira Walsh is a great player to have in that starting 11. To be honest, I don't actually know um, where I'd end up putting Chelsea's midfield because they sort of play that 4-2-3-1. I'd potentially even say putting someone like Nusken up into the top, into that sort of number 10 position, and having Walsh and Cuthbert in midfield might end up being their strongest 11. But we'll wait and see what happens when they get into the Champions League, because that is realistically why Kira Walsh has been signed. Chelsea have basically already won the WSL. The reason they're getting players like Inigo Miguemes, like Kira Walsh in, is to win the Champions League. It's something that has escaped them for years. It is something that escaped Emma Hayes in her time at the club and would have just been the cherry on the cake. I think with Sonia Bonpastor, she's obviously doing even better than Emma Hayes did. And with these extra signings as well, I think Chelsea might just be edging Barcelona now to be my favourites for the Champions League. Obviously, Lyon have made some good signings this window as well. Don't count them out. Arsenal and City and some of the other bigger teams in there as well will be doing their best, but I think it will be between probably Chelsea, Barcelona, and Lyon to take it. And I think Chelsea are now my favourites. But we'll wait and see what happens there. As I mentioned in the podcast last week, I think Chelsea can basically not write off the league. They still need to be picking up points, but they can rotate a lot more. And I think that rotation will allow them to play their strongest team in the Champions League, in the FA Cup, in those sort of games where they really need those performances in one-off games. But yeah, Villa 0, Chelsea 1. Another unfortunate performance for Villa because once again, they've done this a lot this season under Robert Paul and obviously under their new management as well in Natalia Roro. They put in good performances. They have a really good side. They have good depth in their team as well. They put in a really good performance against the champions, almost win it, and still come away with a 1-0 loss. They did it earlier on in the season in Robert's first game. They've now done it in Natalia's first game. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it's just the way the cookie crumbles. Let's take a look at the rest of the games that went on this weekend. So, as I mentioned earlier, Brighton drew against Palace. It was not a good quality game of football, but judging by the highlights of this game, there was an own goal to put Brighton in the lead. Majasari didn't stop Lily Woodham's back pass and it rolled through into the net. I really felt for Lily Woodham here because this goes down as Lily Woodham own goal. She's got that against her name, but it was not her fault. It was a relatively easy back pass. It didn't look like it was bobbling or anything. It wasn't a ridiculous pace. Majasari just put her foot over it somehow, missed the ball, and then even though it didn't look like it was going that far, she still couldn't keep up with it before going in the goal. So poor Lily Woodham's got that against her name, and obviously poor Palace going a goal down early on. I think that was in the first half, and obviously they've been on a really bad run of form. They've been losing a lot of WSL games in a row, so that wasn't the start they wanted. But they got a bit of saving grace when Brighton got a red card. Maisie Simons going in with a really, I don't think it was a very malicious challenge, but I think it was definitely dangerous. I think there was a very high foot in there, something that you just can't do. Unfortunately, I don't think she was going out to try and injure anyone. I think it was just a poorly timed, poorly executed challenge. It was a deserved red card. That's it. You just got to take it and move on. Mikato levelled it with a relatively scrappy goal late on for Crystal Palace, but from what I've heard from people going to the game and from the highlights I've seen, and obviously looking at the stats behind this as well, it's probably a fair result. I think Palace deserved something from this game, and they did well after that own goal early on to come back and get something out of the game. Lily Woodham kind of getting back against her own goal as well, because she got the assist to Mikato's goal. So at least she's got something positive to take away from this game. The next game I want to talk about is one that had a lot more goals than I thought it would. Is Everton 4, Leicester 1. Shannon O'Brien got the goal for Leicester. It's great to see her back on the score sheet. She's been out with a couple of injuries, missed most of 2024, but got, well, the second goal of the game. She got Leicester's goal in this, scored, and immediately ran over to, I was going to say the sideline, but just sort of behind the goal where her dad was, gave her dad a hug. I know he's been big in sort of supporting her on her recovery. So that was just a really nice moment, and nice to see her back, because I think she's a player that's got a lot of talent. She's got a lot of potential. She's still quite young, and she's got a real sort of tenacity about her. I don't necessarily think she's best as like centre forward. I do think she's probably better on the wing, but she's pretty good up front, especially with the options Leicester have at the moment. They're obviously bringing in some players. They've got, I forgot what the name was, but they brought in a Finnish striker. We might see her starting to play through the middle, but Shannon O'Brien deserves a spot in that starting lineup, even if it's out on the wings for me. Everton in this game were just the better team. It certainly struck me that Leicester knew full well that Everton would try and counter-attack them. And Leicester have been really good at defending that sort of situation. They have sort of, the reason they're not in the relegation zone is because their defence has been so good. They've certainly not been scoring many goals, but they've been really good defensively. But in this game, they just couldn't stop what Everton were doing. I think they maybe tried a bit too hard to attack and therefore left themselves open, and Everton basically tore them apart. Tony Payne got 2 assists in this game, and Kelly Gago got 2 goals, as well as other goals from Haruka Hayashi and Kachi Snoij. So that rounded out a really good win for Everton. I think they're starting to gel. I mentioned in the last couple of weeks that Everton are just going to need time to gel. They've obviously had a lot of new signings this winter. They needed it. And one, I think it's great to see that they are willing to put the money in to get these new signings. You know, these signings don't necessarily come for free. Everton have recently been taken over. You can see the Manchester United example is a perfect example of what we don't want to see happening, which is a club gets taken over by someone that has a lot of money and they go, okay, let's just prioritise the men. I don't really care about the women. That's not what we want to see. Obviously, Everton's new owners are doing a much better job, I assume, because I don't know as much of the ins and outs of it. It's not really as public, but they've come in and Everton have started signing players. Those players have started gelling together really well. They're sensible signings as well. They're not just splurging loads of money on a big name. They're signing players that are working well for them. And yeah, I think they're going to be a team that is going to be safe this season comfortably. I do think we might even see them push into the top half. I think Brian Sorensen's quite a good manager as well. So with him on the side and coaching this team through it, I wouldn't be surprised to see them reach the top half finish. The next game I want to speak about is Liverpool 1, West Ham 0. This was a relatively dull game, I think, from the stats and what people have said about it. I only watched the highlights of this. Liverpool's goal was quite enjoyable to watch, though. It was really good play from Kerry Holland. I think she's a really underrated player. She eventually set up Leanne Kiernan for a really delightful one-touch finish. A really nice footballing goal is how I describe that. West Ham, however, looked pretty poor in this highlights. In the highlights, I think they're pretty much all Liverpool. And to be honest, the stats back that up as well. West Ham didn't offer much of a threat in this game. You can sort of see that those games where Katrina Gorry isn't on top form are the games where West Ham tend to struggle a bit. I think between Gorry and Asai, if those two players aren't firing, West Ham really struggle. They're quite over-reliant on 2 very good players, but I think they need to invest a bit more in the rest of the squad. They've got a lot of decent squad players, but no one that's that top-tier level. You know, you could see Katrina Gorry going and playing for maybe not an Arsenal or Chelsea or a Man City, maybe not even a Man United, but pretty much any other team in the league. I think Gorry would probably start. Vivasay potentially would start as well. Pretty much no one else would at West Ham. Maybe King of Shemek, depending on the team. So yeah, I think West Ham need to, if they stay up, because if they go down, they might not do this, but if they stay up, they could really do with investing a bit more. Rianne Skinner, as I mentioned last week, is really good at making a team more than the sum of its parts. But unfortunately, the parts still need a bit of work for her to get a good result for West Ham. The final match of the weekend was another one that, if you missed it, don't worry, don't go back and watch the full game, even though it's probably on YouTube. Just watch the highlights. I didn't actually watch it myself, but again, sounded like a snooze fest. All the good goals over the weekend were just in Everton and Manchester City, and that was it. The rest of the games were quite low scoring. We had 3 1-0s and a 1-1. This one was Spurs 0, Manchester United 1, with Elizabeth Turland scoring early on. She has a really good record of scoring against Spurs. Both teams had a few chances in this game, but nothing, not a lot. Spurs didn't have any sort of real clear-cut chances. They had a few decent shots from distance, but nothing that you were like, oh my God, they should have scored that. Manchester United had a few decent chances as well, but again, nothing that you were like, other than the Turland goal, there was nothing where you were like, oh yeah, this shot's going in. So yeah, a little bit of a snooze fest across the league, unless you were at the Joy Stadium or at Everton. But they were the matches that happened this weekend. Before we get to the sort of fantasy WSL bit, we're just going to take a quick break. Hello listener, welcome back to Decoding the WSL with me, Sam Stattorino. We are on to the Fantasy WSL section. As you know, it's one of my favourite sections to go through each week. However, this week, unfortunately, I'm not going to want to be talking about my team that much, only because I was not very good. You can call me Brighton because I've been really good in the first half of the season, but since 2025 started, I've reverted back to just being bang average. I've dropped out of the top 100, I've dropped out of the top 10 in the Stattorino mini league, and this week again, I didn't get that many points. I think I got 40. Valentulus Joyce, Maya Letitia, and Millie Bright got 60% of my points, 24 points between them out of the 40 that I got. Kasparai, I got -1 for her performance. Obviously conceding a lot of goals, I think she got a card as well. It was not a good week. Gonna have to regroup ahead next week and might end up making more than just the 2 transfers. We'll wait and see. The team of the week this week was Andy Tompkins, who his team is amazingly, for the team that got the number 1 team worldwide, his team was called 1 Point More Than You, which I love. I think that was so apt. He got 86 points in this week, including captain Millie Bright, who got 26 points. He played the wall, so we got extra points for, Bright, Bjorn, Hampton, Letitia. He also had Valentulus Joyce, although she was on the bench, so he could have got even more points. A really good week. Although, at 86 points, I'm not 100% sure. I'll ask the people at Fantasy WSL. I think that might be the lowest, highest team, if that makes sense. So if you look at each game week and the sort of team of the week, I think 86 points might be one of the lower ones, which shows how much of a low-scoring week it was. So it doesn't make me feel quite so bad about me getting 40 points. And hopefully, listener, if you didn't do that well either, you won't feel quite as bad for you. I'm going to go into the Fantasy WSL a bit more depth in next week's pod. Obviously, it's a bit closer to the next week, so I'm going to have a bit more in the way of data, and I'll get some more stuff over from the Fantasy WSL team. But yeah, that is it for me this week. Hope you've enjoyed our little roundup of the weekend's games. Thank you, as ever, for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. If you enjoyed today's episode, do make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, because it does help. And if you can give a 5-star review as well, it goes a long way to help others find the show. You can follow at Decoding the WSL on Instagram, and as ever, for more stats and insights, follow me at Stattorino on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, and now TikTok as well, where I'll be posting some bits on there. Join me next week around the same time. I'm going to have a couple of guests on next week's pod. We have Jamie Spanger and we have Finley Chung. They've both been on before. They're both excellent guests. They're both excellent journalists. I'm really excited to have them both back on. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You don't miss that one when it comes out. Thank you again for joining me, listener. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you at the next one.